Welcome back to #Lawyered, everyone. There's some news coming out of the Peach State, and you guessed it, it's all about voting laws. What do they really say? Are they great? Are they terrible? Are they somewhere in between? Let's find out. Welcome back to #Lawyered, everyone. You have your favorite legal aid team live and in studio with Austin and myself.
And we're going to talk about voting laws today, which seem somewhat relevant given everything that's gone on in the last year and a half. And
basically the whole Trump presidency and then the Biden presidency. Spencer actually told me, I have never personally run into anyone who has said that, oh no, the real president is currently not in the White House. He's out. And I was like, what? But apparently one of Spencer's clients informed him that she wasn't worried about any upcoming tax laws or changes because, President Biden wasn't president. And I was like, oh.
Yeah. I mean, I guess the only problem with that, historically would be the Constitution, but we don't have time to go through all that now.
we'll hold up on that. So. But I was like, oh, okay. That's takes all types.
Yeah, and I mean, in the world of conspiracy theories and cancel culture and everything, I can see how voting laws gets in there because there's always a way to spin something one way or another. And I do think there are some serious issues with some of the restrictions that have been attempted before with voting laws.
Absolutely. I think that there are some really serious issues, but I do think it's important for people to understand that the Georgia voting laws, the way it turned out, is not as restrictive in some senses as a lot of the suggestions and the original way it was written. Now, is it too restrictive? Let's get into it and let's see if it is too restrictive, it's not, and I think it's important that we present both sides and let everyone decide for themselves if they think it's too restrictive or not.
Yeah, well, and I think a lot of what we try to do on this show is take some of the hype and some of the the hyperbole that's there, try to drill that down and get
Dial it down a little.
And see, okay, what does this actually say? What does it actually mean? So people can make an informed decision.
Absolutely.
And hear both sides, like you said.
100%. So, all right. Going all the way back to the beginning. So, again, the Georgia voting bill, it came out. It had a lot of chatter, had a lot of hype. So it's called SB 202, right? So Senate Bill 202. And it's 98 pages long, so it's not a light read.
A lot of people don't realize how long these bills typically are.
98 pages isn't even as long as I've seen some bills.
Sure.
Some of these are crazy long. Have you ever looked at how thick the Patriot Acts 1 and 2 are?
No, I haven't.
It's so much paper. Oh my gosh, yeah, it's a lot. Anyway, so instead of going through every single page, which is too much, we'd be here for a month talking, which I can do, but it's fine. We're just going to take a few, I think, key takeaways and a few key things that a lot of articles and a lot of people have been talking about on and off social media. So the first thing that I want to discuss with the Georgia voting law, right, is that SB 202 would enable the Georgia State Election Board under certain conditions to remove and replace local election superintendents.
And the election superintendents, what are their responsibilities typically?
So essentially it's to make sure that things are running appropriately, that there hasn't been misconduct, that there hasn't been fraud, if you will, that there hasn't been cases of negligence. Although personally, and this is an unpopular opinion, I think negligence is rampant in elections.
Really?
Yeah, I think that, look, I can't even get a frickin' check from the IRS for 2 years. My 2019, return just came in the mail 2 months ago. So I think there is negligence, because, especially with mail-in ballots, because I think the postal system has a hard time delivering things, especially during a pandemic when so many people are using the mail system for things other than ballots. They're trying to get very critical items like diapers for their babies, So do I think there's negligence because the postal system was taxed in a pandemic? Yes. Do I think there was fraud? It's pretty high burden. I don't particularly think there was fraud. But anyway, the state election board, one of its many characteristics, one of the things is just to make sure things are running correctly, that there hasn't been some sort of severe mix-up, intentional or unintentional. So, but, of course, there are concerns, right? And so the state election board, surprise, surprise, in Georgia is Republican controlled. So one of the concerns is that the board could interfere with how elections in the state of Georgia are run.
Yeah, and I think given the chatter that was surrounding this last election, it's a legitimate concern in terms of people getting upset about it.
Absolutely.
There's all sorts of oversight that go into all these types of things. Do you think that would actually impact an election? I don't think so, but it's sure to cause some controversy, obviously.
Absolutely. It'll cause a lot of controversy, and I think there will be a lot of news coverage of it going forward because a lot of people are they're just concerned that someone could say, oh, on the board, I don't like this decision. Maybe if this voting law had been in place during the Trump-Biden election, I think some people were concerned that the voting board could have been like, oh, well, I don't really like the election in, say, Folsom County, so I'm going to flip it and say it's for President Trump instead of Biden.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I'll take it a step further. I think a lot of people are very reactive and very emotional when they hear these things, and they believe anything that comes out. That's part of the problem. And they start saying things. They would probably start saying things like, well, they need to take somebody else, put them in there, and make sure all this voter fraud isn't occurring because of the miscount of votes that went on in certain counties when, like, I'm sorry your candidate lost, but that's not what happened, most likely. So I could see this being very controversial, and you could hear a lot of what I'll call uneducated opinions come out about they need to put this person in, they need to go in and take over the voting procedures because this isn't being run correctly. It seems like, to me, the move of putting this in there is you're just begging for some people to get pissed off.
I think so. And I think it's going to cause a lot of issues, a lot of problems, a lot of... when I say issues and problems, I think it's going to cause a lot of unpopular editorials, campaigns on Twitter, Instagram rants. Social media, I'm sure, will be on fire.
A lot of social media war, a lot of uproar, probably without any legitimate facts behind it.
Which is, funny that you say legitimate facts, right? Because at the end of the day, the only way, right, that this sort of thing could happen, someone on the state board says, I don't like this election result, I'm going to flip it. So the only way that could really happen is if the board, found a very clear record of wrongdoing, or incompetence in a county, and then it would take steps to hold the election officials accountable. So even then, it's not going to flip a vote, but it will hold the election official accountable if, say, the election official, I don't know, got completely wasted at 9 a.m. on vote counting day, and then by the end of vote counting day, they look and they're like, oh, I don't know what those 20 piles of mailboxes full of paper things are. They look like chocolate to me, and then they're ballots. Okay, well, that's clearly incompetence right there because they got wasted and didn't count 20 crates worth of mail-in ballots.
Yeah. Well, and let's not forget, this is a good time to talk about checks and balances.
Right, yes.
There's an opportunity here that if the state election board, who I guess at that point, are they acting as an arm of the executive branch or the legislative branch at that point?
That's a really good question. I would think... Wouldn't they? They would be part of the executive branch.
That's what I was thinking.
Because they're not legislative branches when they're creating actual law, and they're not creating law here.
They're carrying out the laws of the election laws, basically.
Yeah.
So they're kind of like a regulatory agency of some sort. But either way, even if we're wrong on that, and they're part of the legislative branch, there's the check of the judicial branch where if a citizen of Georgia believed that the state election board was acting inappropriately under State Bill 202, then they can take judicial action. They can try to file a TRO, which we've seen all that stuff that happened. I mean, all the things that happened.
If they were personally harmed.
If they were personally harmed. I mean, but there's actions they can take within the court system, and I may get the procedural side wrong, but there are steps they can take. You probably need a constitutional lawyer, which I'm not, to go and figure that out. Or you just need someone
who likes to nerd out on, civil procedure rules.
That too.
Hi, guys.
But we got to make sure that people understand, and I think that's something that people don't think about in these types of steps. The checks and balances.
100%. I think people have completely lost sight of the fact that our entire system of government is premised on checks and balances. And I think it's really funny because people get really bent out of shapes, over this or that. And I was like, at the end of the day, if you let the system run its course, it will be checked by the judicial branch.
Yeah. I mean, it's been doing it for many years.
It's been doing it for a long time.
Yeah, it has. It has, exactly.
But anyway, so all right, so now that we've talked about the first one, I think one of the next big issues that people get all hyped up about in SB 202 is the ID requirement for absentee ballots. Not in-person voting. This is the section regarding ID requirement for absentee ballots. So, basically, dun, 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 voters will have to use identification to vote by mail, similar to in-person voting requirements already in place in the state of Georgia.
And so from looking at the language here, they can send in a copy of their driver's license, state ID card, or other types of photo ID with their ballot. And that's how that's how it
would work.
That's how it works.
Yeah, that's the logistic there. So now the concern, here we go. So here's the concern, is that some people feel that the ID requirements will impose very unequitable burdens on people in certain groups with an emphasis on minorities, right? Or the poor or people with disabilities, because generally speaking, you see a higher frequency of people in these populations that have an inability to get to a DMV or an inability to have easy access to technology. But Austin, what's the counter there?
I mean, the counter is that you've got ID cards that you can get that are not driver's license. They're not tied to your ability to drive. You don't need a passport. Well, they're not a passport. You can just get a state issued ID. I remember when I was a kid, in order to drive my parents' jet ski, I had to have an ID card at 12 years old plus a boater safety course.
Yeah.
So, I just got a state issued ID card.
Yeah, and so in Texas, we call that a Texas identification card. Yeah, so you can get that.
Right. You can.
It's not hard. If 12-year-old Austin can do it, I'm sure a lot of people can.
Yeah. Well, and then, the flip side of that is something you already brought up, which is, well, maybe some of these people have a hard time getting to the DMV or getting to anywhere to get a state issued ID card. And that makes sense in theory. I think the basis behind it, though, would be to prevent voter fraud and all that. And so I don't know, to be completely honest, I don't know where I stand on that, because I can see both sides of the argument and see why you could argue it's an infringement on a fundamental right, because voting is a fundamental right that we have, which is different than some of the rights like driving, which is a privilege.
Yeah.
But at the same time, the barrier is pretty low. And I don't even know in Texas what it costs to get a state issued ID card.
I don't know what it costs, but I do know what the requirements are, and they're not very high.
Okay, what are the requirements?
So you have to have proof of U.S. citizenship, or if you're not a U.S. citizen, that's okay. You just have to have proof of lawful residency. Okay. So you need proof of Texas residency, so like a water bill, an electricity bill, things that you can easily get if you pay rent at an apartment. You need to be able to prove your identity, right? So you are who you say you are, and your social security number. That's it.
Yeah.
That's not a lot.
Pretty low burdens. Pretty low burdens.
So, do I think that there are ways that maybe could be helpful? Yeah, I think maybe, for example, if private companies like, say, Uber, or if there was like an Alto in Georgia, maybe they could donate some of their proceeds and offer free rides to individuals who want to go to these offices, who are maybe disabled or maybe who don't have access to vehicles, to go to an office to get these state identification cards. And so that would solve, I think, the access issue. And then also, too, I think maybe greater publication and circulation of places where you can photocopy things. It's not just like a Kinko's or FedEx where you have to pay for this. I think oftentimes public libraries will allow you to do this for free.
Yeah. I don't know for free or not, but I know that, a lot of public libraries have copy machines. Another thing that I was just thinking of as you were talking there is, part of the concern from a party basis is, okay, well, maybe you're alienating certain voters that are going to vote for my party. Well, we've got plenty of voter registration drives and all these types of things that go on. If you want to galvanize that for your constituency, why don't you set up situations where you can get mobile voter ID registration?
That's an excellent idea.
Polls and kiosks and things like that in places where people are going to be frequently traveling or be around that need these identifications.
Absolutely. I mean, look, if we can have a mobile food truck, I'm pretty sure we can figure out a way to have a mobile copy machine.
Now, I would say we probably need to privatize that and let the parties do it, because if we let the government try to put it together,
yeah, that would be a bad idea.
It's going to take a long time.
Yeah, but I think that's a really great idea to have the local precincts to figure out a way to do that. I like that.
Because that's a big complaint, right? You're cutting off my constituency. Well, let's fix that.
Okay, let's fix that, and let's have, the local parties get on it.
Exactly.
I think that's a great way to go about it. So, but speaking of, checks and balances like we were earlier, let's talk about the establishment of Dropboxes. So I heard, when I was reading this and I saw the phrase Dropbox, I was like, wait, how do you make Dropbox, which is a digital file storage system, a literal physical thing? I was very confused.
Yeah, that's the first thing I thought when I saw it too. Because that's what we use to store all of our firm's files on too.
But apparently it's like a literal actual box. I think it's kind of like the mailboxes, like the blue things where you put letters in.
Well, so yeah, probably something like that. Now I can't help, and you may get this, you may or may not get this. Matt, I bet will probably remember this. But you remember the Al Gore, the lockbox, the whole SNL skit that? Oh man, it went on for a long time.
I'm too young for this, Austin.
I know. But it was like a 3-week running on Saturday Night Live, making fun of Al Gore because he started talking about the concept of a lockbox for security purposes. So, anyways, moving on.
Anyway, so, okay, now that you showed your age over here.
I do that just about every episode, so.
Anyway, so SB 202 permits at least one permanent Dropbox for the return of voting ballots per county in Georgia. So what this is supposed to do is supposed to help facilitate mail-in absentee ballots. Because we had a pandemic, people are concerned about catching coronavirus, completely understand that. And then some people have a hard time getting away from their jobs on election day or during early voting to actually go and vote. And so as part of the way to facilitate greater voter turnout, there are going to be permanent drop boxes, and there's going to be at least one per county. However,
so is the idea, just to make sure I understand, the idea is instead of mailing your ballot in, you can go and physically drop it in the drop box is what?
That's my understanding.
Okay.
However, the law also limits the maximum amount of drop boxes you can have per county. So, previously there had been 38 drop boxes in one county, but now the law has dropped it to say 8 in this particular county.
Okay.
And so the concern there is that, by limiting the maximum number of drop boxes you can have, you'll disproportionately affect more populous counties that tend to lean more Democratic.
Because you can't have as many boxes in as many convenient locations, and so there's going to be people that maybe get lazy, who don't know where the boxes are, all those sorts of things.
And that there's going to be long lines at these boxes, and that they're going to be disincentivized from waiting in line to drop off their ballot in these boxes.
Interesting. What do you think about that?
Look, so my opinion is that just like a courthouse, right? Sometimes in certain counties, there's only one courthouse, and you have to drive a little bit to get there, or you have to figure out a way to take a bus to get there, or you have to figure out a rideshare system to get there. And so maybe I'm less sensitive to this because I'm a lawyer and I have had to drive a really, really long way for my cases in the middle of very small town Texas, hours away from DFW, because there was only one courthouse that could handle this case, and it was the middle of small town Texas. So I'm sure I'm biased, but I think ultimately what this is doing, right, this balances the need of security and accessibility. You're providing accessibility to people who are concerned about going to vote in person or don't have the ability to do so due to job restrictions, childcare restrictions, so on and so forth. But by limiting the maximum number of security boxes, right, you're making sure that there's some level of security and integrity with the system. So I think there is a balance that is being struck, much like there's one, in small counties, there's one courthouse per county.
Yeah. I guess, to kind of flip it around the other way, assuming that the election system was able to figure out how to make these boxes secure. Mm-hmm. I think, we like to operate off of certain assumptions to put things into perspective. So assuming they could figure that part out, then I would think that there wouldn't be a real good reason to limit the amount of drop boxes you have everywhere.
Given that, I would agree with you.
Because
if they were able to make them secure, I would say, load them on up.
Yeah, well, because I think too, if you juxtapose like the courthouse and the voter registration box, in the voting box, we're talking about a fundamental right, your right to vote, and my perspective on that is we need to make that as free flowing as possible and as easy as possible for everybody.
I would agree with that. Yeah, no, I would agree with that. So if there was a way to create greater security with the drop boxes, then I would say, yeah, let's have more of them.
Yeah.
So is this portion of the law a little too restrictive? Probably is.
Yeah.
So, but the next thing that people are really discussing is that there are shorter periods for runoffs. And so at first I wasn't terribly familiar and I didn't really understand this because from Texas, I don't do Georgia law.
Right.
But when I was reading about it, so what this is basically discussing is that in Georgia, the law is that if no candidate tops 50%, the top 2 vote getters are going to go ahead and compete in a runoff. Okay, so the new law shortens the period for holding a runoff election. So it shortens it from a 9-week period to a 4-week period. So at first I was like, oh, well, that's great, right? You know, like, let's be efficient, let's be snappy, let's keep it moving. You know, but there are concerns here, of course. And so the concern is that this change could compress the early voting period, and in doing so, it would limit voters' options and potentially shut some people out of the process. Because
of just not being able to go vote or not being able to, okay.
Because it's a shorter period, and sometimes people, again, there are childcare restrictions, there are work restrictions, maybe there are health concerns. And so by shortening this period, people are concerned that the right to vote is being infringed for certain groups.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I think I agree with the counterpoint, which is that it's a more manageable runoff election. Honestly, in the way society's going right now, people want to know stuff as soon as possible.
Instantly.
So I think that probably is going to bode decently with the constituency because you're going to figure out who's going to be elected 5 weeks shorter than what you normally would have in a runoff.
Yeah, over a month.
Yeah.
So, and then the last one, and this one is the one that I have heard the most blow up over.
That's funny. This is the one where there's the most controversy.
Right? It's kind of wild to me. Restrictions on handing out water. This one, holy smokes, it's been all over Insta, and people have gone wild over it.
Why?
Well, there's now restriction against handing out food and water to voters, right? And people are upset because they think that this criminalizes helping voters, that it's inhumane, that it disincentivizes people from voting, that it disproportionately affects minorities, and that it's a way for Republicans to maintain control of Georgia. I think those accusations go a little far.
I think they go a little far. I mean, I think also the idea that handing out food or water at a voting station is going to completely sway somebody's vote is a little disingenuous as well.
I think I would agree with that.
It's a little silly to have that in there.
I think so, because like, look, in Texas, for example, you can't have any political signs within, I can't remember how many feet of a polling place, right? But people are extremely strict and enforced. And like, I got screamed at once because I got lost and I asked for directions and I was wearing my vote for so-and-so shirt. And they're like, get that out of there. This is against the law. And I'm like, I'm sorry. I was just asking directions. I'm like, get out. Okay, I'm sorry. I was like traumatized. That lady was really mean to me. I mean, I understand she was trying to just, enforce fairness.
Karen was doing her job.
Yeah, Karen was doing her job. To her credit, I probably should have turned my shirt inside out. She would have still gotten mad at me, I'm sure. But, I was like, oh my gosh, I'm sorry. But, so we have those restrictions in Texas. And look, at the end of the day, like, if someone is handing out a pack of like Cheetos and water bottles, I don't really think it's going to affect how people vote party-wise.
I don't think so. But
I don't, but then again, I'm also going to bring my own water bottle, which specifically the law allows. If you want to bring your own food and water, you can totally do that. And but anyway, let's like actually talk about the actual law here, right? Because, people are like, oh, you're denying grandma water, and what if she passes out? What a criminal you are. And I was like, No one's denying grandma water in this voting line. So Section 33 of SB 202 states in relevant part that no person shall solicit votes in any manner or by any means or method, etc., including but not limited to basically providing food and water to an elector, so on and so forth. Okay, so you can't hand out food and water to people waiting in line. Subsection E, this code section shall not be construed to prohibit a poll officer from making available self-service water from an unattended receptacle to an elector waiting in line to vote. So, no one is denying grandma water. Grandma can walk over to like one of those little igloo containers. Like, don't they have that in like football practice and stuff?
Well, no, we had like a, not, you want to go off on a tangent here, we had like like a sawhorse with a PVC pipe.
What's a sawhorse?
Like you use it to, it's got tripod legs, you use it to lay stuff on to like, so you can saw it.
Okay.
So we had one of those with a rod across the top, a PVC pipe with holes in it. You hook a water hose up to it, turn it on, and it just, so
what the
you went over there, you lean over, you get some water out of the PVC pipe, put your helmet back on, and get back to practice.
That sounds, what if you get water up your nose? That sounds miserable.
At that point, as worn out and tired and hot as you are, you don't care. You get over there, you get some water, put your helmet back on, and get back to practice.
Wow, okay.
So no, there was no Sparklets container with like the little, spigot
Little
right there,
push
and
tab?
with the styrofoam cups where you can lean on it and sit and talk, casually.
Okay.
This was more of a, hey, get over there, get your water, come back, put your helmet back on.
Wow, okay. Peek into the institution of Texas football.
Yeah,
Got it.
it's an institution, that's for sure.
It is an institution, my gosh. Okay, anyway, so what I'm envisioning are things that they have, like the big Gatorade coolers that have the little spigots that you can...
Sure.
Yeah.
More effective than a PVC pipe.
I would think so. Also, I don't think are PVC pipes BPA free?
Oh yeah, we were real concerned about that. And during two-a-days in Texas high school football, real concerned. We didn't know what that was back then.
Okay. So anyway, long story short, grandma can bring her own water, she can bring a sandwich, she can go to an actual cooler of water and distribute water to herself in a cup or a water bottle. She's not being forced to drink out of a PVC pipe situation.
Yeah. That's good.
Unlike Austin, apparently he's still bitter about this.
Oh, I'm not bitter. I just think it's funny to talk about because most people don't get it,
Yeah, no, I don't understand that.
So big picture, let's look at all this. I mean, in my opinion, big picture, aside from the fact that you can't drink Republican water or eat Democrat Cheetos, these laws are really not changing they're not changing the landscape of voting other than addressing a few little changes that quite honestly probably have a lot to do with COVID and some of those situations and all of that. So I do think it's humorous, and I always find this humorous, and I'm a little cynical about this.
Sure.
So I do think it's humorous when people flip out about minor tweaks in laws that really don't affect the overall big picture of how the process is going to go down.
Right. At the end of the day, is it going to make a difference that grandma isn't going to be handed a water bottle? Which, first of all, no one should be handing grandma a water bottle because she's like high risk for COVID. So no touching, no touching.
I'm not going to get into that because I still don't understand how everything works with how COVID's transmitted.
I don't know. It's contagious, and if you're old, you're like high risk, is my understanding.
Yes.
So if grandma is old, which, some grandmas are not old, so props to them. But if she is, no one should be handing her a water bottle because no one wants to give grandma COVID because they don't want to feel guilty if she dies from COVID, heaven forbid. Okay, so she should anyway bring her own water bottle for safety concerns.
Yeah, and overall, these differences, they're not going to make a huge deal.
No, they're not.
Big difference, and we have seen some similar discussions in Texas. Haven't seen a big sweeping change in election process.
Not one that's been enacted. So actually, Texas and I believe Arizona, there are now, I think it's Arizona, but don't quote me on that. So there are actually now bills on the table recently that would enact more voter reform that people are saying, oh, Texas is going to be the next Georgia, making commentary about how restricted the Georgia law is. So maybe in the future, if people like this episode, and if the Texas bill passes, we can do a breakdown into the relevant sections of the Texas bill and see, okay, well, did Texas actually implement strict voter control measures, if you will, or did they not? So we'll see.
My ending hot take on all that is I think that there's a lot of things I think in government that if you privatize them, they would run a lot smoother. I would say if there's a way to figure that out with the way the voting process is done in a way that wouldn't sway or bias or prejudice how the outcome would come out, I think we could probably figure out a way, some private company, if they could make money off of it, could figure out a way to make this more efficient, more effective, more secure. But that's my
100%.
opinion a lot of times on government programs, so that's just me.
Wow, what are you, a capitalist?
I think I've been told that before.
And on that note, ladies and gentlemen, Austin the Capitalist and I are going to be signing off, and we hope you enjoyed this breakdown of the new relevant sections of the Georgia voting laws.
Don't try the PVC pipe trick at home.
It sounds miserable. Anyway, stay tuned for closing arguments.
Guys, thanks for listening. Closing arguments are coming up, but make sure before you go rate, review, and subscribe to our podcast anywhere that you listen to your podcast. Check us out on YouTube, and you can check us out on Instagram and talk to us, tell us what you want to hear about. You can search us at #Lawyered, spelled out. You can talk to Andrea at andrea.s.turner, and you can talk to me at The Dallas Lawyer. See y'all again soon.
Welcome back to Closing Arguments. During the era of a pandemic, everyone is into fitness, or maybe not, I don't know, but we're definitely into activewear. And what does activewear make me think of? It makes me think of working out. And what does working out make me think of? Peloton. Everyone loves the Peloton, or do they? Apparently, there have been 39 accidents on the new Tread Plus that was brought out by Peloton, and Peloton was like, well, accidents happen, we're not recalling the Tread Plus. Is there going to be a spate of product liability lawsuits? Sit tight and see.